we're in 1 John, and if you could put the title slide up there, Jody. We're in 1 John, and Tony did, I think, a great job last week talking about, working us through 1 John 4:7 through 5:4. And so if you didn't catch that, or if you want to listen to it again, it'll be online shortly. And I'd encourage you to go back and listen to it.
It's on Facebook too.
It is on Facebook already.
There's no sound until you get to the sermon.
Oh yeah, that's right, because I goofed up there. So anyway, today I'm going to talk about a little bit, one of the last paragraphs, a little line in there. And if you don't know what that is at the end, that's of that sentence, or that title, that's an interrobang. It's I like interrobangs. It's when you want to ask a question, but you're also like really excited, and so you have an exclamation point and a question mark. Like when Austin told me that it's pretty certain, they think, the people that have the inside scoop, that the World Cup final in 2 years is going to be at Cowboys Stadium. I was like, no way, interrobang. So, like that. So, why type 2 characters when you can type 1? Anyway, the section that Tony walked us through, John says that God is love, right? And he's not saying that God is loving, although that's true, and he's not saying that one of the things that God does is to love us, although that's also true. But he's not saying those things in that sentence. He's saying that when God is love, that's his essence, right? That's his, just who he is. Everything he does is loving us. All his activity is love, not just one of them. And so he talks about that, and if you think about it, this makes sense, because God is he's the God revealed in the Bible. He's a community of love, right? The Father and the Son loving each other in and through the Spirit. That is the portrait of God that we get from the Bible. And so it's just natural that then us as his children would also be a community of love in and through the Spirit, right? And so then John goes on to say that God's love is perfected or made complete among us, right? He's not saying that it's through our perception of or experience of God's love, but through our expression of God's love. That's how it's made perfect or complete, as we express it with each other. And then he closes with this exhortation, and this is 1 John 4:20 and into verse 5, or chapter 5. So he says, if anyone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. And this commandment we have from him, whoever loves God must also love his brother. He goes on, everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has been born of God. And everyone who loves the Father loves whoever has been born of him. If you love the parent, you love the children. By this, we know that we love the children of God when we love God and obey his commandments. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments. And here's the phrase, and his commandments are not burdensome. For everyone who has been born of God overcomes the world, and this is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith. So let's think about that phrase, and his commandments are not burdensome. Is that your experience? You don't have to answer out loud, but just think about it. Now, what commandments is John talking about here, first of all? Well, we'll go back to verse 21. He says, this is the commandment we have from him. Whoever loves God must also love his brother. loving God and loving your brother. And he's really focusing on, and he has been like this whole book, and it's not the last time, on, hey, if you have love for God or if you believe in him, then it's going to be made manifest out here in the love that you show through each other. And that's the commandment, right? That's what Jesus said. Love God, love your neighbor as yourself. On this hangs the whole of the law and the prophets. So, yeah, it's not burdensome. Has that been your experience? Is putting yourself second to your brother easy? Is seeking your sister's well-being over your own always a breeze? Does a lifestyle of grace and forgiveness towards everyone else all the time come naturally? What does John mean when he says, and his commandments are not burdensome? So, to get at that, I want to tell you something a little weird about me. Here's a clue. The suspense is killing me. Yeah, there we go. I in general, I don't mind helping people move, and most of the time I kind of like it. Now, don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean I want to do it every weekend, okay? But, once a year, a couple years, whatever, yeah, I'm down. Like, there's something about just, getting together with some other folks and trying to muscle some heavy things around tight corners and playing the Tetris game in the back of the U-Haul. That, yeah, it's something. To me, really, it's really about the like a shared manual labor. Except for a city boy like me, I mean, we're not barn raising here, so it usually takes the form of helping somebody move. and yeah, I've helped, man, I was thinking through all the people I've helped move. I've probably forgotten half the people I've helped move. I was remembering how I hadn't known him for very long. I helped Rich Buquet and his family move out of their place in Duncanville into a temporary housing here. And then later when they moved into their home, it was still being built at the time. Their kids in and out of college. I think I helped Scott Wheeler move one time. I was trying to remember if I'd helped the Halls move in or not. I can't remember. One summer, not too long ago, I think it was 2020. We helped the Parks move out of their apartment and then into some storage, and then what felt like an hour later from the storage into their regular house. I think it was a couple weeks, but. Yeah. Yeah, still sore in between. I think the last person that was for me was helping Noah move into his apartment, which is what that photo is from. So yeah. Now here's the thing, because I kind of like it. Does that make it easy? No. I don't think it's ever been easy. First of all, it doesn't matter what temperature it is, sooner or later, and usually sooner, I'm sweating through whatever shirt I have on, and as Mike said, as the years go by, it takes longer to recover. Used to be a day, and now maybe it's 3 days, whatever. It's not easy, but it was never a burden. You get what I'm saying? It wasn't easy, but it was never a burden because I kind of like it, right? And if you don't like it, then it would be a burden maybe. But for me, that's my experience. Something can be hard, but still not be a burden, and things could be easy, but still be a burden. If I think about the things, some of the stuff I have to do as part of my job, there's some of them that are not hard. I just hate doing them. And if I talk to somebody who doesn't mind doing those things, they're like, what? What's the big deal? It's not that hard. I'm like, I know it's not that hard. I just hate doing it. It's a burden, right? And if we could go to the next slide, here's like a little diagram. If things might be easy or hard, and they might be burdensome or not burdensome, and so you could probably think of things that are like in that upper left quadrant that are easy and not burdensome, right? Something that's easy to do and you don't mind doing it. Right? I mentioned things at work in that would be some of those things at work would be in that lower left quadrant, right? They're easy to do, but to me, they're a pain in the neck. I hate doing them. I procrastinate. Right? The moving thing for me up there is in the not burdensome, but it's always hard most of the time. I mean, there's a lot of camaraderie there, and I like that part. But we're still lifting a whole bunch of heavy stuff for a few hours, right? Can you see what I'm saying? You can probably think of different things, right? So when John says his commands are not burdensome, he's not saying that it's always going to be easy. It's talking about something else. Like what is it that makes something a burden, right? You dread doing it. You have a lot of bad experiences doing it in the past. It's something you're not suited to. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons, right? But he's saying his commandments are not burdensome, or at least they shouldn't be. Actually, there was one time that it was a bit of a burden, only I didn't want to mention it because first I want to make my point about things can be hard but not a burden. But there was one time where moving was a bit of a burden, and it was, probably 16, 17 years ago. We were helping a young couple in our home group move. They were attending our home group. They were moving. I think this is when they moved away. Like they got a job in another town, and it was kind of like the last time I saw them, I think. And me and a couple other guys from the home group, showed up ready to move them, and they had a U-Haul truck there that was way too small, and which we need to go get another one and stuff. But the main thing is I walked in ready to start lifting things with whoever I was with, and things weren't packed yet. A lot of things weren't packed yet, like strewn around and still, bagging stuff, and I'm like, okay. And I, we went through it. I'm like, all right, I'll try to roll with the punches here, but it's just me, right? I'm not saying that they did anything wrong. Maybe you think they did, maybe not, whatever. That's not my point. My point is my expectations weren't met, right? I expected I'm going to go here to lift stuff, and I don't really like helping people like in that scenario where like I don't know where you want this. We're on the clock here because I know you need to get this out here soon, and like that's not my scenario here, So I'm like, this is not what I thought I signed up for. And I was glad that we could still help them and try to bless them that way, but that was the one time that it was a bit of a burden. And actually that move as far as like lifting things and moving things wasn't that bad. I've had lots of worse. So in some ways it was physically easier, but still like, oh man, this is not what I wanted. And so, yeah, that expectation wasn't met. And this is often the case in relationships. Right, we're talking about loving one another, loving our brothers and sisters. That's often the case, right? You expected something to go one way, you expected them to do something or not do something. You expected them to know this or that about you, and that didn't happen. And then what do you do? So I want to give you two things, and these are things that that John gets at in 1 John in his kind of a little more roundabout way. Like sometimes direct, but sometimes indirect. But that really is something that's just clear in general in the scriptures, right? So two things that can help you make a shift from from loving your brother and sister, shift that from being burdensome to not burdensome. Okay? Shift that from being burdensome to not burdensome. Even if it's still hard, right? That's not what we're talking about. But whether it's a burden. Okay, so here's the first one. Oh yeah, I forgot that slide. There you go. It should be up here, not burdensome. Whether it's easy or hard, it should be up there, not down there. So next slide, please. Pay the price is how I phrased it. This is Jesus talking to all. See, it says he said to all. In Matthew, he's talking to his disciples. In Mark, his disciples are there, but then he calls other people to him. And so he says, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. For what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world but forfeits his own self? You've heard this verse before, probably, or at least the idea. You've heard people say that, say no to yourself, lose your life to find it, those kinds of things. I think that, so Jesus is saying we have to, by saying deny it, right? He's saying deny yourself, meaning put yourself second, the things that you want, things that your ego wants, the things that you're like, I want my way in this, I want this to be for me, to my advantage, right? Denying yourself means you're disadvantaging yourself for somebody else's sake. And more than that, he's saying that daily we should be willing to pick up our own execution rack, which is what a cross is, and march to our own deaths. That's my way of putting it, but I think that's what he's saying. When and I don't think he's trying to be edgy here. He's not trying to make a viral TikTok. I think he really means this. That we have to put ourselves second and say, Lord, I'm going to let you direct me. I'm going to let you say what's good for me and what's not good for me. I'm going to do all the things that you asking me to do to help others. And it works out because others should be doing that for you, right? So this isn't about, well, who's going to meet my needs or whatever. Well, the other people. They're doing that for you. You're doing that for them. This is the upside down kingdom, right? Rather than as Pastor Dane used to say, get all you can. What is it? Get all you can all you get, and sit on the can. That's not how the kingdom works at all. It's the exact opposite. And so Jesus says we need to deny ourselves, and loving one another is a burden when I keep making it about me, right? But if I can come to a place where I got to say, look, Lord, this is what you're asking me to do, and then it's not about me. It's about that person, what they need. Then that helps that burden thing shift. It's not about what I wanted or what I expected, but about them, right? This is especially true when we find ourselves with an attitude of hey, he or she is a Christian and they should know better. Right? Like they've been a Christian a long time, or they've read their Bible, or we've talked about this. Weren't they listening to that sermon? Why do they think that they should know better? those times it could be particularly hard to love one another, right? It can seem a burden. And it's okay if it's hard for you. It's hard for me some of the time. Some of the time it's not hard, right? For all of us, it'll be hard at some points and easier at other points. That's okay. Like, you're not doing anything wrong if it's hard. I'm talking about the attitude of this, really, God, I got to do this again. And he's saying, what? Deny yourself. Put yourself second. And when we think, hey, that person's a Christian, they should know better. Tony made a reference to this last week. It's I don't know, a way of seeing it that came to mind a while back, and we were talking in our one of our meetings. I'm kind of surprised that how, I don't know how much legs it's had. But here's how I think of it, right? The Bible talks about our old self and our new self, and so here's how I think of it. There's this man who walks beside me, and he looks just like me, and he sounds just like me. He might say crazy or bad things, but I mean, his voice is my voice, right? And he looks just like me. But the things he's saying or doing or did or said in the past are the things that maybe I'm trying to still live down today, right? He's my old self. And when we're dealing with each other, here's the question. Do you see someone's old self expressed and confuse it for their new self? It's not hard to confuse him, because like I said, he looks just like me. He sounds just like me. But you need to be able to say, I think that needs old self talking. Pardon me, your old self is showing. Right? And so, and then I got to be able to do that. I got to be able to go, man, that's not the true Avery. That's not the Charlie that's redeemed. That's just his old self talking. That's not the Seth that is, living for God. That's just he had a relapse, just slightly. Like it happens to all of us. I mean, there's so many exhortations in the Bible about, putting to death the old self, right? Like he's dead, but we still got to kill him, kind of thing. Just like the kingdom is here, but not yet, right? We're living in it, but there's promises that we're pulling into our time frame, but there's still more. Right? That's in between time applies to our old self too, right? Like that guy, he was drowned in the baptismal pool. He was impaled on the cross, and still, like a zombie, he's coming back sometimes. It can be infuriating for me but my old self is still doing this, right? And it's like, oh man, I thought I was better than that, or I thought I was over that. But the problem in relationships, you get what I'm saying? The problem in relationships is when I see that in you, and I think that's how you are today, and I don't recognize that that's the old you. And now, hear me well. I'm not saying that this isn't some kind of mystical, I really didn't do it, it was my old self, one of those like akin to the devil made me do it type of things. It was still me, right? It was me. But what I'm saying is to give each other grace. That's how I think of it, right? We're in this level of like, we think we're all pretty good humans, or that this is what being human means, until Jesus came, and then we're like, oh no, actually that is what's true humanity. And then he's elevated when we're rescued and by him, he's elevated us all to that spot of this is what being truly human looks like. But we still have these relapses. Does this make sense? And I'm saying it to say, if it helps you, if you don't connect with the analogy, that's fine. but I think some of you do, and it certainly helps me to just think of, look, that just wasn't really Tony talking, right? That was whatever, his old self for whatever reason. It can be you just had a bad day, and it comes out. In his book, Love and Respect, the author Emerson Eggerichs, and this is a book that he describes this. This book is for like couples. It's a great book. If you've not read it, I recommend it. If you're married, but he describes this dynamic in marriage that he calls the crazy cycle, and if you kind of generalize it a little bit, I think it applies to all relationships. And the idea is there's this vicious cycle of I react wrongly to something you did or said, and then that makes you react wrong, right? My old self comes out, and then that, like, to use the modern words, triggers you, and you react badly to me in a way that now I'm like, it incenses me even more, and then you're just on this crazy train. And he says when you realize you're on this crazy cycle, you got to stop. You got to, like, one of you has to say, okay, that's it. I'm not playing, right? Even though everything inside of me wants to like react to what you did or said, I'm out of this game, or else it's just not going to stop. And he says, who goes first? He says, well, whoever's most mature. So there you go. Whoever sees it first, And I think this is a dynamic that can happen in our relationships at church too, right? Particularly, some people get along fine. There's not, you're the same personality, or you have a lot in common, whatever. But then there might be somebody else that what they do naturally, they're not even thinking about it, rubs you the wrong way. But the problem is, what you do naturally is maybe rubbing them the wrong way. And then you just don't want to be around each other because you're always rubbing each other the wrong way. But that's not what God wants, is to just avoid each other, right? I mean that's just saying, hey, I never have I've conquered my drinking problem because I just never go near this stuff, right? But if I can sit, right, there's that progression between, I drove in, into the parking lot I'm talking about, let's say, an alcoholic, drove into the parking lot of the bar and sat there for 30 minutes before I finally, mastered my urge and drove away. Versus maybe years later, that person just drives right by, just never even thinks about going in, right? That's true freedom. And true love of one another is when you can be around each other but still not be doing that thing. And so we have to be able to break that. And maybe you expected them to do something you didn't. Here's the deal. For some of you, the expectations you have of someone else, and it could be somebody in this body, it could be somebody in a different body. The expectations you have are unrealistic, at least at this moment in time. For where they're at, for where you're at, it's unrealistic. And you need to accept that, and you need to, Scott, get over it, as Scott would say, and move on. And how do you do that? You die to yourself. And that's what's going to get you past that. And this could be about, like I said, expectations of believers in general, or about a particular person. I'm not saying you write somebody off or that relationship off as a lost cause. What I mean is that we're all different. We're all works in progress. And so you need to quit having this expectation of others. And you need to quit thinking that they're as mature and perfected as you. And shift your focus to expressing God's love for them and denying yourself. Okay? Just as they are. Before they ever change, before they ever whatever. And I'll give you the hard truth, is that for some relationships, it'll always be that way, or might as well as always be that way. Like you might, this is more rare, but you might have somebody that you that just, you've gotten better, but there's just always something that you don't like or rubs you the wrong way, and it's just, once you're dead to yourself, you won't feel it. But it can take a long time to get there. Does that make sense? So, here's the second thing. First is you got to pay the price. The second is you got to participate in the power. Much has been written and said and taught about how we've become a new creation and how through the Spirit that He's given us, right, that we're able to do things that we couldn't do before. I'm not going to repeat it all now, but here are a couple times that John and that Jesus talks about it. John 6:63. This is when Jesus is talking to the crowds after the bread, that whole saga, after He's multiplied the bread and fed the 5,000, and He says, "It's the Spirit who gives life; the flesh is no help at all." And then later on, at the Feast of Tabernacles, He says, "Whoever believes in Me, as the Scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water." And then John pauses the narrative here and says, "Dear reader, he was talking about the Spirit. He was talking about the Spirit, which hadn't been given yet, so nobody knew. But later we figured it out." And so we have to die to ourselves, and we have to live for Him. But the good news is that we don't have to do it by ourselves. And in fact, you won't succeed if you try. And I think we all understand that concept. But sometimes it takes that. It takes an act of the will to participate in that. To say, okay, Holy Spirit, like I can't do this, but He's actually somehow transformed us, right? He's made us capable. He's written His law on our hearts and made us capable of following it naturally. That's what He's done. Don't ask me how. But that's what He's done through Jesus and through His death on the cross and this process of transformation, is that somehow we're able to follow His laws it's just second nature. And then what happens when we do these things, we can shift this from being a burden to being not burdensome. And we can work through the hard things in His power, right? It's still hard. It's a lot harder if it's hard and you hate doing it. If it's a burden. It's hard enough when you have to die to yourself, when you have to pick up your cross and say, okay, I forget if it was Randy Clark or whoever had this, he says it's like Jesus picks up a sword and puts the point right here, and He says, come here. A lot of times that's what the Christian walk is like. And the thing is, there's so much reward. But man, we're stubborn sometimes. And that's how it feels. I mean, that's just the truth. If you felt that, I think you know what I'm talking about. But if you've been through the other side, you know the grace and the freedom that's possible. So once we do that, we can next slide, we can live out the potential of this, right? John is in 1 John, he's envisioning this community of believers that they're so completely devoted to God and to one another. And they're so healed inwardly that reconciliation within the community is just a natural byproduct. That's what John is talking about. And the thing is this a pipe dream of his, right? I don't think John thinks it's a pipe dream. I mean, when he's writing this book, he's an old man. He's towards the end of his life. Like, if he was ever like a young dreamer, those days are long gone. I think John is deadly serious about this, and he absolutely believes that a community of believers can achieve this in and through the Spirit. And I do too. I do too. I don't think it's impossible either. And honestly, I'd rather go for gold and end up with silver or bronze than to just refuse to enter the course at all because of all the obstacles that I saw. So if you disagree with me, then you say, well, no, that'll never be possible. We'll always have this. We'll always have that. Okay. We can agree to disagree on that. I think it is possible. But either way, whether you agree or that or not, let's go for it. Right? Let's find out. The only way you're going to find out is by trying. And let's deliberately move to a place where we can put aside any ideas or attitudes of, man, this is a pain in the neck, what's Jesus asking me to do, of that burden feeling, and just work through the hard stuff, right? Give each other grace, change our expectations. Get smarter about recognizing, when somebody's old nature is showing. Let the Spirit transform you so that when that happens, you're not reacting, right? So that we can be a community that is so healed and transformed that like I said earlier, it's just reconciliation happens naturally. We still might, have issues we've got to work through, but it's just a natural byproduct. And the world will know us by the love that we have for one another. So I want to close with this. I just want to read Colossians 3, the first 11 verses, and it really, to me, it really sums up what we've been talking about. And some of it I have here just for context, but it's 11 verses. You can do it. You can pay attention for that long, even though I've been speaking for a while. Verse 1, if then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things that are above, not on things that are of earth, for you have died. You're a dead man walking. And your life is hidden with Christ in God. And so when Christ, who's your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. He goes on in verse 5. Put to death, therefore. Does that sound like what Jesus said? Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you, sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. On account of these, the wrath of God is coming. In these you too once walked when you were living in them, but now you must put them all away. And if you think that first list was too well, I don't do any of those things anymore. How about this one? But now you must put them all away, verse 8, anger, wrath, malice, slander, obscene talk from your mouth. Don't lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator. See what he's doing? He's saying it's happened and it's happening. You've put it off and put on, but it's also still being renewed, right? It's here, but it's not yet. It's done, but it's still ongoing. And the famous sentence, here in the body, there's not Greek or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave, free. Somewhere else he says male or female. He's not saying that those people don't exist, that males don't exist, or that Jews don't exist, or, Hispanic, Irish, Scottish, whatever. Wealthy, not wealthy, from this part of the country, from that part of the country, this kind of job, that kind of job. He's just saying that in the unity of the body, those things don't divide us. We're not grouped that way. We're grouped this way. Christ is all and in all. That's how we're grouped. It's Christ in all of us, and he is everything.